Once upon a time, before Canon and Nikon dominated the photography world, there was a fierce battle among the Big Five: Canon, Nikon, Pentax, Olympus, and Minolta. Among these giants, Minolta stood out as the most innovative, reshaping the industry with groundbreaking inventions. But what really killed Minolta? Was it a simple failure to adapt or something far more complex and tragic? Let's dive into the story that most people miss. Minolta wasn't just another player in the film era, they were trailblazers. In 1985, they introduced the Minolta Maxxum 7000, the world's first mass-produced 35mm SLR with fully integrated autofocus and motorized film advance. This camera didn't just compete, it revolutionized the market, setting the stage for modern photography. And they didn't stop there. In 2003, they launched the demise A1, featuring the world's first sensor-based image stabilization system, dubbed anti-shake. Years before in-body stabilization became an industry standard, their collaboration with Leica on the legendary CL, advanced metering systems, and unparalleled optical quality cemented their reputation as innovators. But here's where it gets controversial. Despite these achievements, Minolta vanished. How did this happen? The common narrative is that Minolta was slow to embrace digital. But that's only part of the story. The truth is far more intricate and heartbreaking. Minolta's downfall began with a catastrophic lawsuit in 1992, followed by a desperate merger that solved nothing and culminated in their inability to compete in a technological war they could no longer afford. The slow move to digital wasn't the cause. It was a symptom of a mortal wound inflicted over a decade earlier. The mortal wound, the 1992 Honeywell lawsuit. To understand Minolta's demise, we must rewind to 1992. This was the turning point, the event that crippled the company long before digital photography became a threat. The Maxxum 7000 had revolutionized the industry in 1985, but Honeywell, a U.S. tech conglomerate, claimed Minolta stole its patented autofocus technology. The lawsuit ended in 1992 with a jury awarding Honeywell $96.3 million, later settled for $127.5 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's nearly $250 million in 2025. This wasn't a minor setback, it was a corporate death sentence. The settlement gutted Minolta's research and development budget throughout the 1990s, the very decade when competitors like Canon and Nikon were pouring billions into the digital transition. While Canon developed the EOS D2000 and Nikon created the D1, Minolta was still reeling from the financial blow. The timing couldn't have been worse. The 1990s were the incubating years of the digital revolution, and Minolta couldn't afford to invest in the most critical component: sensor fabrication. Canon and Sony were building fabrication plants, but Minolta was forced to buy off-the-shelf sensors, leaving their cameras a step behind in performance and margins. This isn't just a story of missed opportunities. It's a tale of a company fighting with one hand tied behind its back. The death spiral, competing with a broken leg. Here's where the myth of Minolta's complacency falls apart. They weren't slow to embrace digital. They released models like the RD-175 in 1995. The problem wasn't effort or vision, it was resources. By the time they launched the Maxxum 7D in 2004, Canon and Nikon had already established themselves as the undisputed leaders in professional photography. Minolta's cameras were good, but they arrived too late, like bringing a knife to a gunfight they once dominated. Canon and Nikon weren't just making cameras. They were building ecosystems, professional bodies, specialized lenses, and marketing campaigns that left Minolta in the dust. Minolta couldn't keep up, not because they didn't understand the market, but because they couldn't afford to. The merger that didn't save them. By the early 2000s, Minolta and Konica were both struggling. Their merger in 2003, forming Konica Minolta, was less a strategic alliance and more a desperate attempt to stay afloat. The result? A company with muddled branding, combined debt, and no clear market position. They were too small to compete with Canon and Nikon and too traditional to pivot to consumer electronics. By 2006, they had no choice but to exit the camera business, leaving loyal customers in shock. The rebirth, Minolta's legacy lives on. But here's the fascinating part. Minolta didn't just disappear. Sony bought their camera division in 2006, acquiring the A-mount anti-shake patents and decades of optical engineering expertise. Sony's Alpha line, including the revolutionary A7 series, is built on Minolta's foundation. The sensor shift stabilization in Sony's mirrorless cameras? A direct descendant of Minolta's anti-shake technology. So, while Minolta's name is gone, their spirit of innovation lives on. Thought-provoking question. Was Minolta's downfall inevitable? Or could they have survived with better leadership or timing? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's debate.